start that. Okay. I guess because there's only a few of us tonight that we'll all be reading a little extra. Dylan, I'll get you to start us off in Genesis chapter 29 if you want to read the first 5 verses.
Then Jacob went on his journey and came into the land of the people of the east. And he looked, and behold, a well in a field, and lo, there were 3 flocks of sheep lying by it. Out of that well they watered the flocks, and a great stone was upon the well's mouth. And thither were all the flocks gathered, and they rolled the stone from the well's mouth, and watered the sheep, and put the stone again upon the well's mouth in his place. And Jacob said unto them, My brethren, whence be ye? And they said, Of Haran are we. And he said unto them, Know ye Laban the son of Nahor? And they said, We know him well.
Okay, so we'll pause there for a moment. Kind of just recapping where we are over the last, well, I know we've missed some Wednesdays, but over the last couple of weeks that we've had Bible study, we followed Jacob's journey as he's fleeing Esau's wrath and anger over being deceived about the birthright, or rather the blessing. And so his parents sent him to Padam Aram. And so the last chapter was that journey of him traveling to the area where his mother's family is to find a wife. So he left his family problems behind, but he still had his biggest problem with him, and that was himself. And so his time, and we won't see all of it today because it actually extends over several chapters, but his time in Padam Aram, or specifically the city of Haran, it'll bring him quite a lot of hardships that are going to shape his character and change him. Because obviously he's the heir that God's made a covenant with, but he's a deceiver. God's got a lot of work to do on him. And that's going to happen through the things that he's going to face and that others, even his own family, will do to him. So as he's nearing his destination, he comes to a well where the shepherds are gathered. And of course, biblical times, everything happens at the well, right? Because it's the water source. And people often found wives at the well, so this is not a surprising start to a story about finding a wife. But if you just think about it from a practical sense, Jacob's never traveled this way before, or at least that we know of. And it's not like they had, there he is. It's not like they had road signs, or maybe they did have some kind of inscription as you came into town, but I doubt it. Hello, good evening. And so how would someone know where they were? We're traveling in Bible times. We're in Genesis chapter 29. Good evening. How is Jacob going to know when he's reached his destination? Well, he's going to ask a local. That's what you do, right? You ask someone, where are you from? Where is this place? So he stops at the well. He's trying to ascertain where he is. And so when he hears that these men are from the very town that he's looking for, the town of Haran, he knows he's in the right place. And of course he knows what name to ask for, because I'm sure his mother has told him, oh, you need to ask for my brother, ask for my brother and he'll take care of you and, find your wife, whatever. And so let's go on. We're reading Genesis chapter 29. Brother Anish, if you could read verses 6 through 10.
Then Jacob asked him, Is he well? Yes, he is, they said. And here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep. Look, he said, the sun is still high. It is not time for the flocks to be gathered. Water the sheep and take them back to pasture. We can't, they replied. Until all the flocks are gathered and the stone has to be rolled away from the mouth of the well, then we will water the sheep. While he was still talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherd. When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of his uncle Laban, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep.
Okay. So after asking about Laban and his health and, the standard greeting, the shepherd boys point out, here's his daughter coming now. She's also a shepherdess, so she's coming to the well with the flocks of sheep. And so apparently, there must have been some kind of, I won't say love at first sight, but some kind of attraction at first sight, because Jacob tries to get rid of the other shepherds. He wants to meet Rachel by himself. So Jacob's an experienced shepherd himself. He points out that there's still plenty of daylight left for the sheep to graze. Normally most times they would, let the sheep eat for as long as possible then, and they would gather them all together at night, right? Because they want to give them as much time in the pasture so they grow nice and fat, right? So, there's still plenty of day. You should, just water them quickly and then take them back out to pasture. Why are you waiting? Why are you gathering around? Because if they leave, then he can meet Rachel without anybody interfering. But they respond that they can't. A couple reasons for this. If the well was on common land, and so different sheep owners, it would be ensure fairness that everybody was, no one was hogging the water source, right? They would all do it together. Plus, the stone that covered the well, it was very large and it would have been very heavy. So typically these would take several hands to lift off from the well. And so it was a team effort, and this was common among shepherds. Notification. And so then Rachel arrives, right? So we haven't met Rachel yet. We know who she is, but we haven't met her as a person yet. She's Jacob's first cousin. We know that she is a shepherdess. We know that she is the youngest of 2 daughters, and that she is very, very beautiful. We'll see that in just a little bit. So Jacob is likely flirting a little bit. He removes the stone off of the well, and he waters all the flocks that she has, Laban's flocks. So of course it's an act of kindness, right, to do that work and to water all of the flocks. But also he's showing off a little bit, because he's this stone that would normally take multiple people to move, he's moving it off the well to impress her. So I think there's a little bit of that going on, I think. But one thing that we do see on a more spiritual note, I suppose, is the providence of God in this. There's no coincidences with God. He just so happens that he comes to the right well at just the right time to meet just the person that he's there to meet. It's like it's all set up the way that it is supposed to go. But let's read on. Verses 11 through 14. Brother Jiva.
And Jacob kissed Rachel and lifted up his voice and wept. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's brother, and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. And it came to pass, when Laban heard the tidings of Jacob, his sister's son, that he ran to meet him and embrace him, and kissed him, and brought him to his house. And he told Laban all these things. And Laban said to him, Surely thou art my bone and my flesh. And he abode with him the space of a month.
Okay, so this story is actually really starting to sound familiar from when Abraham's servant went to find a wife for Isaac. It's the same kind of thing. Meeting at a well, received with hospitality. In fact, it's pretty much the same family. Laban was there back then in those days, although much younger. So Jacob, upon realizing who she is, upon meeting her, he does the normal, greets her and kisses her according to the culture. And then he begins to weep. He's just so overcome with emotion, probably with a little bit of joy and just relief that he's made it, right? Because he's been on this journey. He's been fleeing from his brother. He doesn't know if he's being pursued. And then, all of these things have happened along the way. And finally, he's where he's supposed to be. So he's overcome with emotion. Rebekah informs her father that this long-lost relative, Jacob, is here. And Laban meets him, shows him hospitality. He's very generous, actually. Of course, that's the custom of the time. That's what you do. You show hospitality no matter who it is, but especially when it's family. You go all out for family. We do know Laban's character, so there might be a little bit of, he's the son of the wealthy relatives, and as he finds out the story, he's the heir. There could be some good that comes from this. And is maybe reading a little bit too much into it right now, But the thing is as we read on, we see that Laban, in fact, does take advantage of Jacob's situation. So now let's read verse 15. Sister Cecilia.
Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what should your ways be?
Okay, just pause there for a second. So Jacob had been with him for 1 month as a guest, right? And there comes a point when you have guests with you, maybe not everyone experiences this, but you know, there comes a point that sometimes you're like, okay, what's happening? Are you just staying around here forever? Are you going to live here? Are you leaving? You know, you kind of want to know what's happening, right? Rather than just them being indefinitely stuck in your spare room collecting dust. So, at first glance, his words seem quite generous, and oh, maybe Jacob. When I first read it, my first thought was maybe Jacob was a really hardworking house guest. Like he was, you know, helping out, and so Laban wants to reward that, right, with some wages. But really, when you look into it, it's not that. It's more like a strongly worded hint. But of course, in the culture, you say it politely. You never come right out and say, "Oh, you've worn out your welcome." You have to hint at it. You have to say it very, very diplomatically. And so he's doing that. When Jacob shows no signs of going home, and maybe even Laban notices, hey, he's got some eyes for my daughter, I can take advantage of this. He's basically telling him, hey, if you're going to stay, you've got to earn your keep. And he's putting him in a position as essentially a hired servant. Family would stay and they would work together and they would kind of have things in common, but you paid wages to a servant. And so he's inviting / telling almost Jacob that he's going to become a hired servant if he wants to stay. So of course then they'll discuss what the wage will be. Let's read on with verses 16 and 17. Dylan.
And Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah was tender-eyed, but Rachel was beautiful and well-favored.
Okay, so we've already met Rachel. We know her. She's the beautiful younger sister. And now we're introduced to the older sister, Leah. And Leah said, I think in the version you read, it said her eyes, what did it say?
Tender-eyed.
Tender-eyed. Okay, so some translations will say delicate. There's different ways it puts that. The meaning's slightly unclear as to how to translate that. Some take it to mean that that it's talking about her appearance, that she was kind of like dull in comparison to Rachel, who was beautiful and full of life and kind of shone. It's probably more likely it's something actually very practical, that she had eye problems, that she was, nearsighted or something, which in that day would be, it's not like they could go to the eye doctor, right, and get glasses or contacts. It's a disability. So it's likely that she probably had poor vision, which when the father's trying to arrange a marriage, they're going to want, right, a hardworking woman that's able to, that lack of sight is going to be a little bit of a hindrance to getting her married off. It sounds horrible, but it's the reality of what it would be. And the fact that these two are compared, how beautiful Rachel is to how ordinary Leah is, there's definitely a complicated family life going on there. That's not the normal way you talk about sisters. Oh, this one's, So there's definitely some conflict, some family issues there, which in the family of the patriarchs we've been looking at so far, that's not a surprise that there are family issues. So let's read verses 18 and 19.
Now Jacob loved Rachel, so he said, I will serve you 7 years for Rachel, your younger daughter. And Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than that I should give her to another man. Stay with me.
Okay. So we know it's Rachel. It says that Jacob loved Rachel, not Leah, not the oldest. He wants Rachel. So he requests that be his wages, that he would work. And we actually learn a lot here, okay? So by offering 7 years of work for Rachel, it tells us a couple of things. One, it tells us that he had no dowry ready, which was the bride price. So if you think back just one generation before, when Abraham's servant came looking for a bride for Isaac, he had all of these jewels and gold and silver. And as soon as he met the woman that was going to be Isaac's wife, who was Rebecca, he just started like pouring gifts on her and on the family and everything. And so it was really obvious that he was wealthy, or rather that his master was wealthy, the groom. Jacob doesn't do any of that. And when it comes to discuss the bride price, I mean, if he had all of that stuff, he could ask for Rachel at any time and offer all of that. He had nothing to offer. So it kind of gives us insight thinking back to the fact that he was leaving because Esau was threatening to kill him, but also because his parents were saying, well, go get married. The bigger of the reasons why he left was because Esau was threatening him. Because had it only been about the marriage, they would have sent him with a dowry. But maybe there wasn't time to prepare the dowry. Maybe there was still some tension there I don't know exactly why, but he fled without the wealth. And so he had nothing to offer. So instead he's offering to work for it. And it's actually here, it's in this period of time. Well, it's going to stretch out to be more than 7. He's going to end up working for Laban for about 20 years. But it's in this time that he really learns the value of hard and honest work. He develops a work ethic, because before he would scheme to get what he wanted, right? Well, now he's actually going to work for what he wants and do it the long way, but the honest way. He's growing in character, he will. And 7 years of wages is quite a big price for a bride. So it shows maybe perhaps how high he valued her, or how, or perhaps he was just didn't want to offer any lower because he was scared it would get refused, right? Because he wasn't coming from a position of influence. When you're bargaining, you want to come from a position of, well, he didn't have that. Laban had the high ground there. And so Jacob's obvious desire, right? Laban can see he loves my daughter. It did open the door for Laban to take advantage of him. So Laban agrees, oh yes, and I kind of picture it, like this, Laban agreeing, oh yes, you can work 7 years for my daughter. And like, he's like, got the evil scheme, behind the scenes. I don't know if he thought of it then or if it came up with it later, but yeah, there's a scheme in there. So let's read verse 20.
And Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed unto him but a few days, for the love he had to her.
Okay, so the 7 years just flew right by because of love. It sounds very romantic, but if you think of it, and men, you think about how much you would appreciate this, working 7 years, unpaid for his work. Other than, he'd have a place to sleep and food to eat, but no pay. He's not able to save up anything for the marriage. He's not able to prepare anything. Literally, all he's getting paid is at the end of the 7 years, he'll be able to get married. That's it. No pay. And I think that's probably makes what happens next even sting a little bit harder, because he's put all on the line here. And during that time, those 7 years while he's waiting to get married, remember, in that culture, there's strict social guidelines between, especially unmarried men and women, but men and women in general. So it's not, like in modern day, it's fairly normal for couples to wait 7 years now. I don't think it's a wise thing. Dylan and I waited longer than that, but I wouldn't recommend it. There's lots of couples that wait 7 years to get married, but it's not like they're dating during that time. It's not like they're spending time together. I'm sure they would have seen each other, but it wouldn't have been a casual, oh, let's go out to dinner. They didn't have that option. There was no dating. But there's a saying it's been attributed to various authors, so I can't tell you who said it for sure. But they claim that happiness is made up of 3 things. I just thought this was interesting. Having someone to love, something to do, and something to look forward to. Apparently that's what it takes to be happy. That's not Bible, that's just somebody came up with that. But Jacob has all 3. He has somebody he loves, he has something to do, the work, and he has something to look forward to. So apparently, by that standard, he's a very happy man. And there is a very key lesson in here as well for us in modern day, especially young people that are looking to get married, that are dating, or those that we're discipling that are looking towards that. And that's the simple truth that true love waits. Because we live in a society that doesn't like to wait for anything. And especially when it comes to marriage, they want all the benefits of marriage without actually the commitment, right? They want to sleep with the other person and they think, well, if I love them, why wait? And it's especially, females especially will think that way. Oh, because I love them, it's okay. I don't know how the men think. I won't presume to ask. But this is the principle here. True love waits. Jacob worked and he waited for 7 years because he loved her. Because he loved her. And the Song of Solomon reminds us not to stir up love until the time is right. So true love waits. Let's go to verses 21 through 25. Sister Cecilia.
Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for my days are fulfilled, that I may go into her." And Laban gathered together all the men of the place and made a feast. Now it came to pass in the evening that he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. And Laban gave his maid Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a maid. So it came to pass in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? What is not for Rachel that I serve you? Why then have to they said me?"
Mm-hmm. So Jacob had patiently waited for 7 years. But once those 7 years was up, he was like, okay, I'm done waiting. We're not putting this off any longer. I want my wife. I want her now. So Laban, he agrees. He arranges the wedding, all the things that go along with that. And it's there at the wedding that Laban hatches his great scheme. And he deceives Jacob by switching the bride. Takes the younger sister, Rachel, and replaces her with Leah. And if you think about this is so similar to what Jacob did in the fact that Jacob pretended to be his brother in order to get the birthright. And now we have Leah pretending to be her sister in order to get Jacob as a husband. So the very thing that Jacob did is now being done to him. And so he gets to feel how it is when the shoe is on the other foot, so to speak, when the roles are reversed. And in both cases, the deception was planned, instigated, arranged by a parent. So there's a lot of similarities between those two things. Now, we don't know whether Leah was part of the scheme in the sense that she was for it and happy to go along with it, or if she was just the fact that she had no choice in the matter. She had to obey her father because that's what a woman did. Personally, I read into it as a little bit of a love triangle where she's secretly pining after Jacob and thinking, oh, if this works, I can win his affection, and I can become his wife instead. So I think she was part of it, but that's just my opinion. I can't prove it. But when you first read this, and I don't know if anybody else has read this and thought, how in the world did Jacob not notice? Like, he's been working for 7 years. It's not like she's a stranger. He's been waiting 7 years to marry her. How in the world did he not notice until the next morning that it wasn't his bride? But if you look at the wedding customs of the day, it helps a little bit to understand how it would have happened. One thing being that the bride would be veiled for the entire day, ceremony, feast, whatever, until she was alone with her husband in the honeymoon tent, essentially. And so it was only at that point that the veil would be taken off. So, okay, during the day, we can say, okay, that makes sense why Jacob wouldn't notice. She has this big, thick veil on. And then if they've been celebrating all day and then it's dark by the time they retire, obviously if it's pitch black, he's not going to be able to see her. And if she keeps her voice at a whisper, then she can disguise her voice. There's so many things that could happen there. And it's probably possible that Jacob could have been a little bit drunk too, because these were wedding celebrations and there was typically a lot of wine involved in them. So he may have not been at his best either. But regardless, when he discovers the change in the morning, he must have felt so silly. Like he must have been mad. That's probably would have been the first reaction. He goes to Laban and he confronts him, and we see that in the next in that last verse there. But this is the law of sowing and reaping in action, because the Bible says whatever a man sows, he'll reap. And it doesn't always work this perfectly, I guess. But that's what he sowed. He sowed deception in his own life. That's what he had chosen to do. And so now he's reaping it, right? He's experiencing the effects of it. And often the Lord allows that to happen sometimes with the things that we've struggled with or the things that we have done to other people. And we pray for mercy, and sometimes God is merciful, and even though we deserve it, he spares us from things. But then there's some things that are just part of our character that sometimes we cannot overcome until we see them in somebody else. Because when it's in ourselves, we can excuse it, we can justify it. Jacob was, it's because I really wanted that birthright and that blessing, my motives were good, right? He can excuse it, he can justify it. But when it's done to you, you see it, you see the ugliness of what's been done, right? And you see for how harmful it is. So this is the beginning of the lessons that Jacob is learning that's going to get that deceiving nature out of him. And that's the first step of that. Let's read verses 26 through 30, Dylan.
And Laban said, "It must not be so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn. Fill her week, and we will give thee this also for the service which thou shalt serve with me yet 7 other years." And Jacob did so and fulfilled her week, and he gave him Rachel his daughter to wife also. And Laban gave to Rachel his daughter Bilhah his handmaid to be her maid. And he went in also unto Rachel, and he loved also Rachel more than Leah, and served with him yet 7 other years.
Okay. So when Jacob confronts him, Laban makes what is quite a weak excuse. It's our local, it's our custom here. The older has to get married first. Oh, didn't I tell you? Didn't I explain that to you? Well, no, you must have forgot that part. Maybe there's truth to that. Maybe that was the real custom, but still, it doesn't justify the deception. There were 7 years. He could have explained that to him. And remember, he had promised to give Rachel to him. He had promised that. But he offers him a new deal. And this is a trend that we're going to see with Laban, is Laban likes to change the deal. He makes the deal, and then when it doesn't work out in his favor, let's just change that a little bit. And it's a common pattern with him. And he does that here. New deal. Well, I'll let you marry Rachel in a week if you'll work another 6 days. Another 7 years. Apologies. And so he accepts the new deal. I mean, he doesn't really have a choice at this point. If he wants to still marry Rachel, well, he doesn't really have an option. I want to just pause here for just a moment and ask a question. What do you think he should have done? if you were in Jacob's shoes and you were the husband on the wedding night that got the bride switched out, what do you think the right thing for Jacob to do would be? Or what were his options?
Didn't have any. He had no money.
Yeah.
Didn't have anything.
I mean, he's still got options, though. He could stick with Leah. He could just accept it. And accept the fact that he's never going to have the one he wanted.
Polygamy's a thing, so.
That's true. That's true. Or, I don't know. I don't know enough about the customs of the time. I doubt that there was the option to say, well, I didn't consent to this, and so let's annul it. And you know what I mean? Because he hadn't intended to marry her. I doubt that was an option. Probably in the culture, it was done. It was consummated. It's settled. I'm assuming. I mean, yeah, but Dylan's kind of right. He is kind of in a no-win situation here. Like, he's miserable with for the rest of his life because. And I'm not saying he would have to remain miserable. He could learn to love her. But, you know, in his thinking, probably, I'd be miserable the rest of my life. Or I have 2 wives, you know. I don't know. But he gets a really raw deal. A really bad deal. Working another 7 years unpaid. Another 7 years unpaid. And this time, he doesn't even have anything to look forward to at the end of it because he's marrying her at the start of it. So, yeah. I guess the only positive is that he didn't have to wait another 7 years. He only had to wait 1 week before he could marry Rachel. He just had to, because what they would do is the wedding celebrations lasted about a week. For 1 week, they would treat the bride and the groom like king and queen. You know, they were spoiled and everything. And there were celebrations and all this stuff going on. And then, so he had to finish out that week, because if he married somebody else before the wedding week was up, it would have been the biggest insult to Leah. It would have completely shamed her. And so Laban wasn't going to allow that to happen. But I'm guessing it probably wasn't the happiest wedding week ever. But Laban gets exactly what he wants, right? He gets both daughters married off, and especially the one he was worried about, Leah. If she had problems, then, you know, okay, don't worry, I've got that taken care of. Married off into a family as well, that he knows maybe he's not wealthy right now, but he knows he's going to inherit wealth. So the daughters will be taken care of. So he manipulation seems to work. But Laban also reaps what he sows. And we'll see that later. Because there's some of the choices that he made, they're going to come back to bite him. And the relationship with his daughters, not so great. His daughters, especially Rachel, do not appreciate his interference. And Jacob's family is going to suffer because of this too. Because now, well, you know, whenever there's 2 wives, there's lots of problems. And the handmaids, which we didn't really talk about, he's going to take them as concubines later on. So he's just got a whole mess of a family. And it's so many problems. It suffers from competition and favoritism, and all of those things that just messes the family up, not only amongst the wives, but amongst his children. So he's not going to have a peaceful home life. And it's going to be probably a little bit like the home he grew up with, where both his parents had favorites and where the brothers were put against each other. Now Jacob's going to suffer the same exact thing because of his 2 wives. And later on in the law of Moses, in the book of Leviticus, it is explicitly forbidden, although the law at that point did not forbid polygamy. It did specifically forbid that a man marry sisters. Like, if he married one sister and then she died, he could marry the other, but not at the same time, so that they would be in competition. This exact scenario was prohibited in the law. And so it goes to show this was not a good situation to be in, and it was not, yeah, this is never God's will for a family to be like this. But it is interesting to see, and we'll look at the children being born and some of that family dynamic next week. Actually, we're not going to have Bible study next week, the week after. But it is interesting to see all of the things that Jacob goes through. That all of the stuff it takes to teach him not to deceive and not to lie. And it's just like all of it gets thrown back at him. And it makes me think of the golden rule. What some people call the golden rule, but Jesus said it. You know, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Well, all the stuff that Jacob had done, he found it wasn't so nice to have it done to you. And maybe that's part of what allowed him and Esau to reconcile. Because now Jacob had the other perspective of how his brother might have felt. So it's just interesting to see that and how God allows all these things to form Jacob's character. Sometimes God allows a lot of crazy stuff. But it's so we can be who he wants us to be to fulfill his plan and his purpose. So yeah, we'll pause there.